You also traveled to the Great Barrier Reef. What did you find there?
Well, what I found there was extremely heartbreaking. I had been there for the first time back in 1995, if I remember correctly, and I was back there in 2017. The first week of what ended up being a major coral bleaching event. It was the second major event of that kind in as many years. And so coral bleaching is what happens when the water temperatures warm up so much that it's at a temperature that the corals can't survive in. So the beautiful algae on them that gives them their brilliant colors, that's a food source for them. And as the waters warm too much, that becomes toxic. The coral then ejects the algae so as not to die, but then it's starving to death, and it's bleach white, and that's why it's called coral bleaching. And if the waters don't cool back down in time, then the coral will die within 3 to 6 weeks of that happening. And that's what's happening. And so when I was there, the bleaching event was occurring, and huge swaths of the Great Barrier Reef were bleaching out. And between the event that happened in 2016, and then the one in 2017, and then another one happened in 2018, over 50% of the reef that bleached out had died in just those 3 years alone. And then right now we have, record warm temperatures in Australia again. And this is the single largest coral structure on the planet. It's 1,400 miles long. It's a World Heritage Site, and most scientists there and many of the studies say that the Great Barrier Reef is essentially in terminal stage, and it probably will not be around for another 10 years.
Wow. So as you're traveling through let's talk about Stan Rushworth, because at the end of the day, as it were, in many respects, you argue that we're almost there, like that so much of this is already baked into the cake that really we need to figure out a way in which to mitigate this, or are we at now the plan should be how are we going to adapt? At what stage are we in this?
I do believe that's where we are, and working on this book and seeing all this firsthand and doing the research, I was confronted with dealing with my grief around this and all the feelings with that on a regular basis. And so I ended up meeting a Native American elder named Stan Rushworth. He's Cherokee. And we started talking, and he started sharing a lot of stories that helped a whole lot. So one of those is that in Western colonialist mindset, we have rights. What are my rights, right? But in indigenous cultures, they believe we're born onto the planet with two primary obligations. One is to serve and take care of the planet. The second is to serve and take care of future generations. And so no matter how bleak things appear to be, they do appear bleak. Humans could even go extinct. There's been a lot of writing about this. We are in the sixth mass extinction. But we don't know for sure that that's going to happen. We do know that tremendous change is baked into the system, and there's going to be a lot of suffering that comes along with that. But no matter how bleak things appear, if I get up each day and I'm thinking about, okay, how can I fulfill those two obligations to the best of my ability to the planet and to future generations, then I've got my work cut out for me, and I've got no shortage of work to do. And I feel very, very strongly about doing that, especially when you look out and you see these student marches, you see these kids walking out of class. They get it. And so am I not going to live my life to serve those kids and be in the deepest solidarity with them as possible, and still do everything I can to try to take care of the parts of this planet that are still intact, and these young kids that, they're born into a world that they didn't create. They're going to have to live in it. So what can we do to help them?
As you look at this stuff, do you think that was there a period of time where we could have made, obviously, on some level, I wonder if human limitations, just from, the inability to see that far into the future and understand our actions today implicate the future made it ever possible for us to do what needed to be done?
Well, it was back in the 80s when NASA scientist James Hansen went before Congress and sounded the alarm bell. He really, at that point, blew the whistle and said, look, we are changing the climate of the planet. If we don't make some dramatic shifts right now in how we are living and certainly the economy, we are setting ourselves up for some big trouble in the not-so-distant future. And if we had listened to him then, and if the U.S. had taken the lead as a leading economic country and said, look, we have to change this entire paradigm. Globalized capitalism is literally killing the planet. And if we started making the dramatic changes back then, we possibly could have averted this. But instead, since then, everything has only accelerated at warp speed. Capitalism has become fully globalized and continues to be so. And, you know, if we're going to talk seriously about mitigation, the first thing we have to talk about is an entirely new economic paradigm, i.e. not capitalism, because this rampant industrial scale production of goods and consumerism, that is precisely what's killing the planet.
And we should also say that the structure of capitalism also created a lot of people who were doing their best to make sure that we didn't listen to people like James Hansen, right? I mean,
that's right.
I mean,
right? Yeah, the system is set up to perpetuate itself, and we have this fossil fuel funded denialist meme in the country, and that's exactly born of the system. I mean, there's over a 97% consensus about human-caused climate disruption, and the less it's 2.9% that either are doubtful about it or disbelieve it. It's you know, there's been some excellent journalism out, very, very easy to find for a long time, that shows that the vast majority of those doubters or deniers are fossil fuel funded.
Right. And so are you in any way heartened by something like the Green New Deal? I mean, it's still just a proposal and is, you know, obviously getting a huge amount of pushback, and it's almost absurd that it's taken this long for just that idea to exist in some, or at least in this more sort of tangible form as something that ultimately could be, a piece of legislation. But does that give you any encouragement?
Well, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think it's anything is better than nothing at this point, and anything that could potentially mitigate this even a little bit is a worthy action. But my critique of it is it doesn't go nearly far enough, and it still doesn't call for a complete shift of the entire economic paradigm, because it's still essentially promoting economic growth and jobs, et cetera, when in reality I think we need to be looking squarely at the fact that the time for degrowth is upon us, and we can either start doing it willingly or it's going to be forced upon us. And I think that's really one of my major critiques of the Green Deal. But I don't want to be too disparaging, because that and other things, anything moving in a better direction than where we're going now is important to do, no matter how fallible it is.
I think that's a good place of anywhere. Dahr Jamail, The End of Ice, Bearing Witness and Finding Meaning in the Path of Climate Disruption. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.